So let's do something very different for today's video. Instead of having some background footage showcasing a certain vehicle, or maybe even doing a regular gameplay of, say, the T90, which was my previous video, we're going to be talking about the current sales. But instead, I'm not going to talk to you about buying the vehicles outright. No, I'm going to do something that you haven't really seen as often, which is which vehicle to talisman. Also, I am going to throw this in there. If by any chance you're going to be taking my advice, buying Golden Eagles for this, use my 3% discount. Now, keep in mind, you don't get an extra 3% off, unfortunately. But what you do, that made sense, is you support me as a creator, because I still see that 3% as normal, cash, and you guys get my in-game decal, and you get to keep that discount link in mind should these sales end. But yes, I'm going to be bringing that up just a few times in today's video. So without further ado, let's talk about which vehicle you should talisman. Also, one more thing too to keep in mind is that this is my opinion. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm not saying you should buy anything. I'm only saying this because I see so many players out there playing with vehicles that they just don't know what they're doing. And it's not necessarily a good thing, right? Maybe it's good for me, it's easy kills, etc., right? But what if you're able to take the existing vehicle that you are familiar with in any area of War Thunder, and you can give it a pseudo premium status? Not really, but let me explain what they are. Talismans give you a sort of premium buff on top of the already whatever buffs you get for the vehicle. For example, here, the T80U, which I've had one for a very long time, gives you plus 100% RP gain. So if you were to take a look at the stat card for any vehicle that has it, you can see right there on the bottom right, this thing has 696% as opposed to, let's say, the same PR of a vehicle that doesn't have it around there. Okay, 10.7, here we go, 476. You kind of see where I'm getting at right there? So it gives you a lot more research, but keep in mind, whatever you play, it will only affect the vehicles 1 BR above and below whatever you're researching, right? So for example, the ZSU 57-2, which does not have one, can only research efficiency from rank 4 to rank 6. Editing Justin here. I did forget to clarify one thing. You can research every single vehicle, but keep in mind, you get a percentage drop off ranging anywhere from, I think, 10 to 15% initially, all the way up to 90% efficiency loss. I believe that's how it was explained to me. Whereas you may get, say, 5,000 RP for one vehicle near the BR, but the same gameplay, the same amount of RP, you would only get about, I would say, maybe 200 or 300 RP for a lower tier vehicle that you don't have. So keep that in mind. Even still, when using the talisman, it does offset it just a little bit, but not by a whole lot. Anyways, let's continue. Whereas a premium vehicle can research all the way up a BR above and everything below, such as the Object 120 from rank 1 to rank 6. So does that make sense? But let's start from the very beginning. And remember, this is all based off my own opinions, and I'll show you the vehicles I have talisman. Now, of course, top tier, I have a lot of talismans up here. I've put on before the discounts, after the discounts, etc. But one vehicle in particular that I would recommend that even I don't have currently right now is the M4A3E2 76 Jumbo. This thing, in the right hands, or if used correctly, is a dangerous vehicle. Take it like this. If you know what you're doing even slightly, this thing in a full down tier is an absolute bully. But in a full up tier, it can still hold its own moderately well, even against those Tiger 2s and so on. Okay, maybe not efficiently, but for the most part, it really can. Also, I would still recommend looking at some of these right here if they're, holy crap, I have so many premiums. I didn't even realize it until I just look at it now. Holy crap. Yeah, I might be a little pay to win here, but you know what? I've been playing this game for 8 years, okay? So I can have a little bit of leeway with that. But another vehicle I would recommend, which I don't have myself, is the M18 GMC. This thing is a little bastard, I like to call it, right? It's fast, it's efficient, it has good firepower, and it can get the job done very well. But keep in mind, just because you're fast and have a good gun doesn't mean you can survive many good hits, because this is a light tank. Technically, it's a tank destroyer. I don't know why Gaijin calls it the, well, a light tank. What's funny is the GMC here is a lower BR, but is a little bit more efficient. I wouldn't really say it's as good as the M18 in my opinion, but for the most part, it can get the job done. Now, moving up to the higher tiers, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. I don't have too many talismans here, but if by any chance you want to, I would recommend a Talisman on the M1 Abrams. This thing, trust me, we're getting a premium as is already, but if you want to save a couple of pennies, this thing is absolutely worthwhile. 10.3 is sitting at a very wonderful position right now where you don't have to face too many top tier vehicles at 11.7, which means that this thing, it's just gonna be that much better. And think about this, you get to grind out top tier tanks without having a true top tier. I mean, that's kind of a win in my book. XM1 does a good job too, but this thing, you can't go wrong with it. Also, if you do have it, not that I'm gonna do this myself, put a Talisman on the AGS. This thing is nuts. It's really good. If you didn't know this thing was great, go look at my previous videos. It's nuts how amazing this thing is, right? 10.3, good firepower, wonderful mobility, crewless turret. There really isn't anything to really hate about this thing outside of maybe not having a 50 cal or very good elevation, but this thing is amazing, trust me. And an oddball one, the M3A3 Bradley. This thing is a wonderful vehicle to scout with, to engage light targets, and those 202Bs can get the job done, but if you're a very passive player, it may benefit you to put a Talisman on here currently, which only goes for, let me take a look at that really quick over at modifications, only goes for 1890 golden eagles versus the usual 2700. So I'd say it's worth putting one right here as well. And the TOW 2A did make it significantly better, but keep in mind, if you have a very passive play style, it'll suit you. If you're aggressive like me, not so much. Now let's jump over to the Germans. This is where I would recommend mostly around the mid-tier area, the mid-low tier, I like to call it, right? The Tiger 1s, the Panthers, and maybe even some of the Tiger 2s. Now I'm going to start from kind of the middle to the bottom. The Tiger 2H. I did get this Talisman for free via Loot Crate a long time ago. And let me tell you this, the Tiger 2s are absolutely wonderful vehicles. These things are outright amazing. Now, I would recommend the Tiger 2 SLA 16, but I would wait for the vehicle pack to come out with the sale a little bit later down the line. I think it's about another week or two before this actually happens. But for the time being, I would highly recommend the Tiger 2, either the H or the P, because these vehicles perform very well. Now, keep in mind, the up tiers are kind of a pain in the ass, just to say the absolute least. Below that, any of the Tigers, right? The Tiger 2, or excuse me, the Tiger 1E right here, I would also recommend. The Tigers in general are just amazing vehicles. The Panther or the VK3002, I would also recommend as well to you, as these are very well performing vehicles, should you know exactly how to angle appropriately, etc., etc. Down the lower tiers, only one vehicle in particular, the Panzer IV F2. This thing is absolutely amazing. Trust me, it still holds very well to this day. Great firepower, decent mobility. Armor protection is kind of a bit of a lackluster, but this is one I would most certainly recommend for the lower tiers. Now, going all the way up to the higher tiers, things get a little tricky. I have Talismans all over the place. On my bag light, wonderful little pseudo SPAA, the KPZ back when it was good, the Weasel 1A2, because this thing is my little shitbox and I love it very, very much. But I think I would recommend either one of these two. The Leopard 2K, which I need to get one myself, or the Leopard 2A4. The 2K would probably be the best deal. This is the absolute best performing Leopard for the BR at 9.7. This thing is nuts. DM23, an autocannon that can be manned by the gunner itself and not the commander, so you get to keep it the entire time. Even if you lose multiple crew members, this is definitely a worthwhile vehicle in my honest opinion. I was going to recommend the Puma, but unfortunately the Puma is kind of a dead meme at this point. Unfortunately. And also the Leopard 1 may be a good one too, but that really comes down to your own personal preference. So let's go look at the Russians. And to no one's surprise, Russia has been performing incredibly well in War Thunder. Their top tier tanks have a 72% win rate right now. They have the best helicopters in the game, some of the best aircraft in the game. And oddly enough, their Navy is really good too, but we're not talking about those. No, we're going to talk about the lower tier first, which in truth, I would only recommend a few of them down here, such as the KV-1s, some of them, but most importantly, I cannot recommend this enough. The T-34-57, this thing is absolutely insane because you get to have a 5-second reload with an aced crew, 5.3, I believe it is with an expert crew, and this thing has wonderful firepower. I mean, look at that K, 145, 145. Of course, this one has better angle pan for the most part, but this thing, I wouldn't really say it's a one-tap wonder, but this bullies even Tiger 1s in a full up tier. So keep that in mind. It is one that I would highly recommend. And of course, you have the PT-76, which is another good one. It's a heat slinger at battle rating 5.3 with a stabilized gun. I believe it's a stabilized gun. I'm pretty sure it is. I'm sorry, guys. I haven't played down here in a hot minute. So let me go ahead, pull this out, which I have it here somewhere. Is it a stabilized gun platform? It is. I can't believe I forgot that. It's been a long time since I've been down here, but this is one I would recommend as well because it has decent mobility and a very good heat shell for the BR, as you can see right here. This thing can, I wouldn't really say one-tap tigers, but do a very good job of it. The IS-1 is also another one, but more importantly, the T-44. Now, unfortunately, guys, we moved this up to 6.7. At 6.3, it was absurd, but it is one I would also recommend alongside the T-34-85, the T-44-100 in the upper tiers. I would also recommend such as the T-64A, the T-10M, the T-72B, and then in the top tier, you can kind of see what I have here. So a lot of recommendations for this. It really comes down to your personal preference. Man, Russia has been doing so good as of late. But let's talk about the British next. When it comes to the British, things can be just a little bit tricky. There aren't too many vehicles that I would highly recommend outside of my own personal favorites, such as the Centurions as well as the Challengers themselves in the upper areas. Although when it comes to the lower tier stuff, some areas I would kind of recommend this is in vehicles such as the Churchill, the Comet, and maybe even say the Ussr or the Bosvark itself, because these are brilliant SPAAs for their respective BRs. The Achilles is another good one as well, but then again, it requires you to play in a very specific type of play style that is something that I'm not super familiar with. So case in point, the Centurions themselves might be the best possible choices, but keep in mind the APDS buff or nerf, depending on how you look at it, can really mean the difference between you putting a talisman and making it worth it and really not having that. Aside from that, higher tiers, there really isn't too much I would highly recommend. The TTD maybe is a good one. The Challengers, possibly if you want to get through the grind, but once you get the first one, they all pretty much play the same except for the 2E, which is just a bit faster, and the Black Knight having an APS. Aside from that, I wouldn't recommend it on the 2F or the TES, maybe the 2F, but definitely not the TES. And that's honestly really it for when it comes. Maybe the Avenger here, maybe, who knows? Let's go over to the Japanese, and trust me, it's kind of the same situation there too. So when I said that Japan is a little bit tricky as well, they don't really excel anywhere, right? They're good at what they do, but they don't excel in that area, unfortunately. But when it comes to the lower tiers, the only few vehicles I would recommend personally is the Chinu and the Cheeto. Granted, the Chinu 2 is a wonderful purchase, one that I would highly recommend you get if you want to. This thing helped carry me during my initial grind, and when the 74G came out, this helped me with the rest of the grind for the upper tiers back when the Type 90 was the top dog. When it comes to the mid-tier stuff, not a whole lot really I would recommend. The STA3 may be a good one for the most part. Auto-loading mechanism, good heat round. Unfortunately, you can be 50 cal in this thing. It kind of sucks in that area. It's very bouncy and a little bit too tall for its own good, but if you use this right, it's very wonderful. The Type 75 might also be a good one because this thing has a wonderful HE. It's awesome how well this thing can work. It doesn't work all the time, but when it does, it's nice. And aside from that, the upper tiers, this is where things get a bit tricky as well. Type 89 might be a good one, but this thing has been seeing nerf after nerf. So the talisman level for this thing has been significantly dropped in my opinion. Sure, 1820, which is very expensive, but is it really worth it? That really comes down to your own personal play style. Type 16 might be a good one in my opinion. And of course, for top tier, Type 90 is a wonderful purchase for a talisman in my opinion. So next up, the Chinese. The Chinese aren't very difficult to work with, thankfully. If you play Russia, USA, a little bit of Japan, a little bit of Germany, you know how to play this nation in full, right? M18 GMC, another recommendation for this. I don't really know where else in the lower tiers, maybe the T-34 1943 model, maybe even the M24, but that's kind of a big one, a big iffy for me. In the mid-tier area, IS-2, can't go wrong with that. And more importantly, a vehicle that I would highly recommend you get a talisman on, the Type 62 6.7. It has a heat slinger, which is very nice, wonderful mobility. I think it used to have an optical rangefinder, but I think they took that away a while ago. Very good APCBC, which I have the Russian version of this vehicle, so I haven't been able to or wanting to play this one in particular, but this has a wonderful amount of firepower. I would highly recommend this. no armor, great mobility, iffy turret rotation speed, so keep that in mind when you do play this thing. And oddly enough, the WZ-305, I would recommend Talisman on this. It has proxy rounds, and they're very good. Trust me, this thing, if you know how to play with, not the automatic per se, but with the backlight or something, this thing can do very well. And if you know how to use the ZSU-57 as is, this is going to complement that just enough. Another one, Type 69. I know, right? Nice number, but check this out. Wonderful mobility, good protection, and a decent dart for the BR. It's not really that great, but the heat FS does offset that just a little bit. Laser rangefinder and decent optics on this thing make it a worthwhile Talisman. In the upper tiers, in the higher tier, top tier, I would say 59D1, which I have one personally, and the 96A. It's a T72 with thermal sights, pretty much. CM11 might be another good one as well. The PTZ89 may be a good one as well, because this is a sniper's dream. Great reload, trust me. And for the top tier stuff, the 99A or the 99-2 right here would be a very good choice in my opinion. Although the ZLT11 is a good runner-up, it really comes down to what you want. This thing is a little tricky to play, but can definitely put in some really good work. Much like the Striker for the Americans, this one is more or less like that with good firepower, but it comes down to you. So next up, the Italians. Yeah, this one's kind of tricky. I don't really know what to recommend, to be honest. Maybe the Sherman VC, because it does have the APDS, which is very, very nice on this. Although the rework kind of made it a little bit iffy, I still would recommend it personally. The M26A1 used to have an armor bug. I would also kind of recommend this just a little bit. And in the upper tier, higher tier environment, Centauro 105, can't go wrong with that. The R3T106, probably a very good recommendation. The Dardo, highly recommended. I did make a video recently about this. If you guys want to check that out, check out this card right up here. Trust me, this thing is worthwhile. And the upper tiers, it really comes down to what you want to do, but I would recommend the Centauro 120. This thing is amazing for its BR, but aside from that, I don't really know what to recommend else here. Maybe the Breda? Although this thing did get up tiered, I've seen players use this thing at top tier to really good effect. I'm not kidding. There was a dude who got 7 kills in this thing at 11.7. It was insane. Yeah, so let's go take a look at the next one, the French. All right, let's run through this really quick. Crusader Mark II definitely gets a yes from me. The AMX 13, maybe the AMX 50 or the M4, maybe in the Surbias, maybe not the Surbias. Definitely would recommend it. The ELC BIS. This thing is a little bastard. I have a whole video on this thing too if you want to take a look at that. It is awesome. It's a heat slinger at battle rating 6.0, and it's a very good heat round as well. This thing can spank tigers very, very easily. Jumbos don't stand a chance. AMX 1390, possibly, but in the upper tiers, this is where things get a little tricky. Mephisto might be a good choice. What else? I was thinking the AMX 40 would be a wonderful choice as well. And when it comes to top tier, just one Leclerc. Don't ask why I have 3 of them. I just enjoy these vehicles, but the first one plays the same as the last, just no CITV. That's pretty much it. But I don't know, maybe AMO 90 if I didn't already say so. Yeah, I think that's it. Let's go take a look at the Swedish. This one is kind of a no-brainer. T-34, the Panzer IV here, and the BT-76, wonderful additions. The Comet 1, T-34-85 would also recommend some talismans for. When it comes to the lower tier, still the IKV-103, the PVKV-2, as well as I think even the STRV M42. I've seen a lot of people use this thing to very good effect. In the mid-tier, definitely the IKV-91, as this has a wonderful heat slinger. Check this out, 400 millimeter. It also has a laser rangefinder. What's really not to love? This thing used to be battle rating 6.7 and it was nuts. 81, it's just a Centurion Mark III, I think it is. So would recommend this as well. And surprisingly, the USH 405. I don't know why this thing is so good. Maybe because it's annoying to fight against, but this thing is a dream to play. I would recommend one there as well. And in the upper tiers, only one vehicle really strikes me as worth it in every sense of the word. The STRV 9040C. Decent mobility. The dart on this thing is nuts. Why it sits at 10.0 is kind of beyond me. This is definitely a 9.7 vehicle in my opinion, but there might be a little bit of a bias sense to that. But this thing is wonderful to play. Good dart, proxy round HE, which is very nice. Gen 2 thermal sights, scouting, good repairability for your teammates. What's not to love? But the same thing, the 121 may also be a good choice because you don't see those 11.7 up tiers at 10.3, which is very nice. Maybe the SDRV 105, it does have Gen 1 thermal sights, and of course another Leopard 2A4, but the Swedish one is better in my opinion because this thing has dart at the very beginning, no heat FS, which is very nice. And DM13 isn't the best. For the BR, it is perfect, I would say. Oh, and maybe the T55M. This thing's nuts. It has a really good dart. Where is it? Yeah, the M1000A1. Sorry, that was kind of a tongue twister for me. This thing is nuts. I love it. I would highly recommend this one too. And you get BR412D, which is a wonderful APCBC. And I forgot to mention for the Russians, the AMD might be a good choice too. Oh, well, we missed that. Let's go off to the next one. Okay, this one might be a little bit tricky. The shot is a good one. It's another Centurion, so that's kind of a given, right? The Magash is... I would kind of steer clear from some of these. I mean, I don't really know which one I would recommend. The 6B, I have it because it has a stabilizer, etc. I think it has a thermal sight as well. It does not, but it's still good anyways. The Galbatosh is probably the one you really want to look into, as the Magash 7C is kind of terrible for the most part. The Turan 4 may also be a good choice, but when it comes to the lower tier stuff, it's kind of tricky. ML90 is definitely a good one for the most part, but in the upper tiers, let me be honest here. Israel has a good setup. Unfortunately, their top tier tanks just aren't up to par. The LIC has an unrealistic amount of protection compared to the Mark 4B and the 4M. It may be true in the real world how good they are, but in War Thunder, this has quote unquote bugged out armor. I'm saying that with air quotes, of course. And I would recommend it maybe on this one as opposed to these two. But then again, at that point, Israel isn't going to be getting too many more Merkavas and higher tier vehicles anyway, at least from my knowledge. So keep that in mind. But I think the ones you see right here are the ones I would recommend personally. And there it is, all my recommendations for some talismans. But please keep in mind, this is only my recommendation. Take a look at the vehicles you play in the nations that you enjoy and figure out which one works for you. Any vehicle that you have a very good amount of time in, I would highly recommend. Let me give you an example of how to figure that out. You go to your service record and click all of the nations, right? Just every single one. Look at the vehicles that you primarily play and consider giving these ones your own talisman on here as they currently stand. As you can see, I play a lot of top tiers, so it's kind of a given. You believe the FJ is my top vehicle in the entire board? It's interesting, isn't it? Man, I miss this thing being so good, but this is a very good way to tell which vehicle needs a talisman to grind out your stuff. But also keep in mind, premium vehicles have their 30% discount. I'm sure there's many creators out there who are going to be recommending their own stuff, to which I say look into those, as in today's video was only the talismans, or perhaps even take a look at some of the vehicles or videos that I've made. Well, that made sense. You know what I mean. Sorry guys, this gets a little tricky to do, but let me know what you guys think about this. Was the recommendation solid? Do you have your own? Which I would ask you to put in the comment section. What would you think be a great vehicle to put a talisman on? Just let's help us out. Yeah, let's help everyone out. Maybe not just take my opinion. Read those comments. Use their opinions for your own. Oh man, I just got done with the stream too. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I'm sorry if this was a bit out of the norm. These aren't very often, and I hope you guys, again, enjoyed everything. And I will see you not only in the next video, or even the streams, maybe even in War Thunder itself. So as always, happy grinding, and enjoy the sales, I guess.